How could 8 MPs end up so completely corrupted by loyalty to Boris Johnson that they end up impugning the integrity of Parliament itself? What happened? How did their brains get so boiled? As I was growing up, there were examples of parameters of probity. Obviously, the offence is getting caught. The offence is always getting caught. It is not the actual commission that is the offence. It is the capture. It is getting caught that gets you into bother. But there was a sort of playing field upon which everybody at least agreed upon what the rules were, right? You might disagree about how severe the punishment should be if you broke those rules. There'd be a little bit of bias, a little bit of footballification. So if it was one of your team that broke the rules, you would probably have a slightly different response from that, which you would have if it was one of the opposition team, one of the opposing team that broke the rules. But there would not really be much dispute about what the rules were and where breaking them would lead. And then along came Brexit. Along came a campaign of such undiluted dishonesty and division that it would take generations, possibly, for fractures and fissures to be repaired. And the consequence of keeping Brexit alive, keeping it inflated, albeit temporarily, and the consequences of propelling people like Boris Johnson to the very pinnacle of power in this country, demanded the promotion of deeply unsuitable, wholly inadequate, dishonest and profoundly stupid politicians. That is, I think, now moving from the realms of opinion into the realms of simply counting. Some of the politicians promoted because they helped Boris Johnson sustain the myth of his own suitability for high office and the lies of Brexit. Some of those politicians that were promoted into places they should never even have been allowed to pop in with a feather duster and clean around the cornicing were spectacular. And it is not a coincidence that many of those politicians promoted into positions millions upon millions of miles beyond their capabilities or qualifications are today named and shamed by the Privileges Committee report into the impugning of the integrity of the committee and its members itself, and worse, the attempt to lobby or intimidate those members or to encourage others to do so. So I think in the case of Nadine Dorries, a woman found to have lied about me, so I can say that with absolute confidence, libelled members of the press, a woman who boasts about trying to get journalists sacked, who makes spurious bullying allegations against her own colleagues which fall apart under scrutiny because of her own history of vile and abusive behaviour on the internet, a troll by any other name, who somehow ended up in charge, briefly, of the online harms bill. She sought to attack Channel 4, which of course this week did a bang-up job on pointing out the obscenity of Boris Johnson's relationships with the family of a Russian spy. Punishment, shoot the messenger. So this list of politicians is, if you like, the proof isn't quite the right word. It's the sort of ultimate illustration of just how much damage has been done to things that were once sacrosanct. Nadine Dorries on Twitter. Zach Goldsmith on Twitter. Mark Jenkinson on Twitter. Michael Fabricant on Twitter. Brendan Clark-Smith on Twitter. Nadine Dorries on Talk TV. And it goes on. Jacob Rees-Mogg on the BBC. Andrea Jenkins on Twitter. Jacob Rees-Mogg on GBBs. Priti Patel on GBBs. Nadine Dorries on Twitter. Nadine Dorries in the Daily Mail. Pouring scorn, not on the process, but on the individuals involved in this judgment. And I'll tell you again, a Conservative majority Select Committee, I beg your pardon, a Conservative Majority Privileges Committee. A Conservative Majority Privileges Committee coming under attack in, frankly, vile terms from Conservative politicians, every single one of whom has been preferred or promoted by the godfather of all of this corruption, Boris Johnson. Nadine Dorries thought she was going to get a seat in the House of Lords. Even more improbably, she got a seat at the cabinet table. Andrea Jenkins has been elevated to damehood. Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, has been given a knighthood after being elevated to the cabinet table. Possibly out of all of them, the one least fitted. Well, between him and Dorries, it would be a prize fight, wouldn't it? And the rest of them as well, similarly. Except Brendan Clark-Smith. I think he just did it all for a biscuit. Did Michael Fabricant get a knighthood? I can't remember. So there it is. If you don't fully understand the scale of the offence, it is about MPs impugning the integrity of the committee and its members. It is about attempts to lobby or intimidate members of the Privileges Committee. What this is about, very simply, it is about politicians, conservative politicians, deploying the tactics of the Daily Mail or the Murdoch press to attack politicians, including Conservative colleagues, on a committee designed and dedicated to policing and scrutinising the behaviour of politicians, in this case, a former Prime Minister. It is about as damning an indictment of where we've ended up as a parliamentary democracy as it's possible to conceive. Conservative MPs not even aware of how egregious their behaviour is, too thick or too bent to acknowledge or understand how outrageous their behaviour is, queuing up to use the language, if you like, of McCarthyism or 1930s Germany or whatever it is you prefer to use, talking about witch hunts, talking about kangaroo courts, impugning the integrity of the individuals and the institution without having anything substantive to say to critique their actual findings, to critique the actual findings of the report, of the committee. It's mad. I'm going to ask you to explain to people listening to this who possibly don't understand how serious it is, how egregious it is. Can you explain how big a deal this is? But crucially as well, so you know how this programme worked, how did this happen? So let's work on the principle, and this is quite a reach, all right? This is quite a reach, but here are the names. Nadine Dorries, Zach Goldsmith, Mark Jenkinson, Michael Fabricant, Brendan Clark-Smith, and then I think Priti Patel, let's get this absolutely right, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Andrea Jenkins. Let's I don't want to say pretend, but let us presume that they were once honourable. Okay, let us presume that they went into Parliament, they went into politics with good intentions. Let us at least presume, if that's too much to ask, let us at least presume that they did once understand the importance of, well, everything really, from the ministerial standards which Jacob Rees-Mogg tried to rip up, but the proroguing, not proroguing Parliament unlawfully, which of course Jacob Rees-Mogg was a key ringleader of, not misleading the Queen, which of course Jacob Rees-Mogg stands accused of doing. But let us just presume that they once abided by the protocols and standards that hold parliamentary democracy together, okay? This is important, otherwise the phone-in's not going to work. Let's presume that all of them once abided by and understood the importance of parliamentary protocol, of parliamentary standards, okay? They once understood that. Go back 6 years, go back 10 years, go back 20. Go back however far you want. But imagine a place where Jacob Rees-Mogg, Andrea Jenkins, Priti Patel, Nadine Dorries, Zach Goldsmith, Mark Jenkinson, Michael Fabricant and Brendan Clark-Smith, let's call them the diabolical 8. Imagine a place where they understood how important this stuff is, and tell me what you think happened to them. How did they end up in such abject disgrace? You might have a favourite. You might think, God, the rest of them I completely understand, but I'm surprised that Goldsmith, in which case I'd suggest you weren't paying much attention to his racist mayoral campaign a few years ago. But what happened? How could 8 MPs end up so completely corrupted by loyalty to Boris Johnson that they end up impugning the integrity of Parliament itself? What happened? How did their brains get so boiled? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. How did their brains get so boiled? What boiled them to the point where they would impugn and attack the integrity of the parliament they sit in?